Hotaru Oraki walked through the school gates on his first day of high school. Students crowded the entrance and kept handing out flyers while loudly calling new students to join their clubs. Hotaru ignored all of them and kept walking straight ahead. He changed his shoes and went to class. He had no interest in joining any club. In fact, he had no interest in doing anything unnecessary at all. If something did not need to be done, he would not do it. If it did need to be done, he would finish it quickly and move on. In class, his friend Satoshi greeted him with his usual energy. Satoshi was Hotaru's oldest and only friend, and he understood very well how little Hotaru cared about normal school life. He tried to get Hotaru interested in the new school year, but Hotaru stayed completely expressionless. Satoshi then asked why Hotaru was still at school, since he usually left as soon as classes ended. Hotaru gave a tired sigh and handed him a letter. Satoshi opened it and saw it was from Hotaru's older sister, who was traveling in India. In the letter, she explained that the Classics Club kept losing members every year and was now close to being shut down. Since she had a strong attachment to that club, she begged Hotaru to join and keep it alive. Hotaru cared enough about his sister to agree. Satoshi pointed out that it would be easy because the club had no current members, which meant Hotaru could have the whole room to himself. That small idea made Hotaru feel a little better. After that, he left Satoshi and went to the staff room to get the key. The Classics Club room was in a quiet corner of the school, far away from the busy hallways. Hotaru liked that right away. He put the key into the lock, opened the door, and stepped inside. There, he found a girl with short black hair standing near the window and looking outside. She turned around and walked toward him. She introduced herself as Eru Chitanda and said she recognized him from the school entrance orientation. Hotaru did not remember seeing her there at all. Eru explained that she had joined the club for personal reasons and asked if he was joining too. Hotaru told her no. Since she was already a member, the club no longer needed him to survive. So he turned around and said she could lock the room when she finished. Eru stopped him right there. She said she did not have the key. Hotaru froze for a moment and looked at the key in his own hand. If she did not have a key, and the door had been locked when he arrived, then how had she entered the room? Eru tilted her head and calmly said the door had been open when she came in. She had no idea how it got locked afterward. Her curiosity immediately grew stronger, and she asked Hotaru to help her solve it. At that moment, Satoshi appeared at the door and admitted that he had followed Hotaru just to see what was going on. Hotaru tried to leave again, but Eru grabbed his hand and leaned in close as she asked for help one more time. Something about the look in her eyes hit him in a way he had never felt before. Because of that, he stayed. The three of them started thinking about possible explanations. Eru mentioned that she had heard a strange clinking sound earlier. They listened carefully and soon heard that same metallic sound coming from below. So they stepped out into the hallway and saw the school janitor moving from room to room, locking doors with a master key. Hotaru quickly figured it out. The janitor had probably checked the remote club room, assumed no one was inside, and locked it without realizing Eru was there. The sound she had heard was the master key turning in the door. Eru had been so focused on the old school building outside the window that she never noticed. Now that the mystery was solved, the three of them walked together toward the shoe lockers. On the way, Satoshi decided to join the Classics Club too. Hotaru still insisted he was not joining, but Eru took his hand again and directly asked him to become a member. Without saying anything else, Hotaru handed over his application card. Just like that, he officially joined the club. The next afternoon, Hotaru stayed after class because he needed to rewrite an essay he had forgotten to bring from home. Satoshi sat nearby and started telling him about a strange rumor spreading around school. That morning, a girl had walked past the music room while rain was falling outside. She heard classical music coming from inside, even though the room was dark and the door was closed. When she opened it, no one was sitting at the piano, yet the music kept playing. Then, once the piece ended, a figure slowly rose from the floor with messy hair and red, tired eyes. The girl got terrified, slammed the door, and ran away. Hotaru kept writing like he did not care, but then he asked one thing. He wanted to know if the story had already spread around the school. Satoshi said yes. Hotaru immediately guessed that Eru would show up very soon and asked them to investigate it. So he grabbed a small piece of paper, quickly wrote something on it, and told Satoshi to get ready to tell a different story. Just as expected, Eru arrived a moment later, full of curiosity and ready to talk about the music room mystery. But before she could get into it, Hotaru redirected her towards Satoshi. Satoshi then told her about a secret group called the Silk Spider Society. He claimed that no one knew who its members were, but every year they secretly placed a hidden flyer somewhere on the school bulletin board. Eru's attention changed immediately. Her curiosity moved to that new mystery, and she asked both of them to help her find the flyer. They went to the main notice board on the first floor. It was covered in colorful club posters from top to bottom. After carefully checking the board, Hotaru pointed out a small notice hidden behind one of the larger posters. Eru looked at it closely, but her reaction was not as strong as before. She said the mystery felt too easy and still had some weak points, but she accepted it for the moment. After that, the three of them went their separate ways. While walking home together, Satoshi asked Hotaru when when he had made the fake flyer and slipped it behind the poster. Hotaru calmly admitted that he only did it because he did not want to go all the way to the music room on the other side of the building. Then he explained the real answer. The student who used the music room often slept there to save time. She kept the windows shut and used a classical music CD as an alarm. When the music stopped, she would wake up. So the girl who opened the door had simply seen that pianist getting up from the floor after sleeping there. Satoshi then asked the real question. Was Hotaru avoiding the mystery just to save effort? Or was he unable to refuse Eru the way he refused everyone else? Hotaru said nothing. A month passed since Hotaru joined the Classics Club, and he slowly got used to a quiet routine. Most afternoons, he sat in the club room with a book and a cup of tea, while Eru sat across from him reading her own book. Sometimes, she brought homemade sweets and quietly placed them on his desk. Hotaru liked those peaceful days the most. One afternoon, Eru closed her book and stood up. She told Hotaru that the club felt too inactive because they never really did anything together. Hotaru told her to sit down and reminded her that this was a literature club, not a sports club. But Eru shook her head and brought up the coming school festival. Every club had to take part in it. Hotaru said he did not care, but Eru kept pushing. She explained that the Classics Club had a tradition of making an anthology every year for the festival, and she wanted to keep that tradition alive. Hotaru refused right away because the work sounded like too much trouble. Eru did not back down. She told him clearly that she would ask him about it every single day until he agreed. Hotaru thought about it and realized that helping her once would take less effort than listening to her daily requests. So in the end, he gave in. He then asked if she even knew how to make an anthology. Eru honestly admitted that she did not. Her idea was to find older copies and learn from how previous members had done it. So the two of them searched the club room together, opening drawers and checking shelves, but they found nothing. Hotaru sat back down, but Eru told him they were not done yet. She pulled him out of his chair and took him to the school library. At the front desk sat a short-haired girl named Mayaka. The moment she saw Hotaru, she recognized him and made an annoyed face. She warned him not to cause trouble. Hotaru replied with a dry comment, which only made her more irritated. Just then, Satoshi appeared from between the shelves, and Mayaka's expression changed right away. Eru quickly noticed that change. Hotaru quietly explained that Mayaka had liked Satoshi ever since middle school. Satoshi greeted everyone warmly and introduced Eru and Mayaka to each other. Eru wasted no time and asked Mayaka if the library had any old copies of the Classics Club anthology. Mayaka said she had not seen them on the normal shelves, but they might be in the back archives. Only the head librarian could allow access there, and that person had not arrived yet, so they had no choice but to wait. While they were standing there, Satoshi asked Mayaka to explain the strange pattern she had mentioned earlier. Hotaru quietly tried to head for the door, but Eru's curiosity was already caught, so he stopped and stayed. Mayaka then explained what she had noticed over the last few weeks. Every Friday during lunch break, someone borrowed the same book from the library, and before the day ended, that book was always returned. Since students were allowed to keep books for 2 weeks, returning it the same day made no sense at all. She brought out the book and placed it on the counter. It was a thick, leather-bound history book about the school. The cover looked old and elegant, and Eru picked it up and said it looked beautiful. Then Mayaka showed them the borrowing record, and that was where it got even stranger. Every Friday, a different girl had borrowed the same book. 5 different students over 5 weeks, all from the same year, all doing the same thing. Hotaru looked over the record and noticed that the checkout and return times were very close. No one could possibly read such a thick book that fast, so he said it clearly. The book was obviously not being borrowed for reading. For a while, they all threw out different ideas. Mayaka guessed the heavy book might be useful as something to lean on. Satoshi joked that it could be used like a shield. Eru suggested that a book that large could help press pickled vegetables. Hotaru got tired of hearing them and told everyone to be quiet so he could think. He looked at the records again and noticed that every borrower was a girl, and each one came from a different class. He then suggested that the book might be used as some kind of signal, but Mayaka explained that returned books were placed back on shelves randomly, so that idea did not work. Then Eru brought the book close to her face and smelled it. Mayaka stepped back, surprised by that. Eru said the book had a faint smell of paint. Mayaka tried smelling it too, but she noticed nothing. Hotaru paused for a moment, then asked Eru to come with him. He led the group out of the library and toward the art room. On the way, he explained that there was an elective class held every Friday that brought students together from different class sections. It was the art class. When they entered the room, easels were lined up everywhere. Almost every unfinished painting showed the same thing, a girl holding a book with a dark textured cover. Hotaru pointed at the canvases. The leather-bound school history book had the perfect shape and color to be used as a prop for figure drawing. Since no one wanted to carry such a heavy book all week, each student simply borrowed it on Friday and returned it the same day after class. Mayaka and Eru stared at the paintings, then turned toward Hotaru with open admiration. After that, they returned to the library. Hotaru started heading for the exit, but Eru reminded him that they still had not found the anthologies. At last, lost, the head librarian arrived. Satoshi introduced the group and asked about old issues of the Classics Club anthology. The librarian checked and then told them that none were left in the archives. Eru's face immediately fell. Satoshi told her not to worry because they would find another way to get the anthologies. After that, everyone went home. The next morning, which was Sunday, Hutaru's phone rang early. It was Eru. She apologized for calling on his day off and asked him to meet her. Hutaru tried to refuse, but she kept asking until he finally agreed. Later, he sat in a small cafe waiting for her. When Eru arrived, she was a little out of breath and apologized for being late. Hutaru asked what she wanted. Eru hesitated and tried to change the subject. Hutaru stood up to leave, but she stopped him, made him sit back down, and told him that she had something important to say, something she had struggled to admit. EP03 Hutaru sat in a small cafe with a cup of coffee in front of him. He slowly stirred the cream and waited. After a while, Eru arrived late. She wore a nice dress and looked slightly out of breath. She sat across from him and ordered something. Hutaru asked why, and she looked down at the table before quietly saying that she had something to confess. Hutaru fell silent at once. His chest tightened as he waited for her next words. Eru still circled around the topic for a bit, and finally told him the truth. She wanted his help solving a personal mystery. Hutaru stared at her in surprise, because that was not what he had expected at all. Eru then told him about her uncle, Sakitani Jun. 45 years earlier, he had gone to the same school and served as the president of the Classics Club. But 7 years ago, he traveled to India and disappeared. People searched for him, but no one ever found any trace of him. Eru explained that when she was small, she had been very close to him. He used to spend time with her, take her to parks, and answer all her questions. He was patient, intelligent, and kind, so she admired him deeply. She also told Hutaru that he reminded her of her uncle because of the way he could think through problems and find answers that other people missed. After that, Eru described the memory that kept troubling her. When she was still a child, she once asked her uncle something, but now she could no longer remember what that question was. Instead of giving his usual gentle answer, he said something that upset her so badly that she started crying. Her uncle did not comfort her. He just sat there quietly and looked troubled himself. In the end, her mother came, carried her to bed, and she cried herself to sleep. That moment affected her so deeply that her mind sealed it away. She could not remember what she had asked or what her uncle had said. Hutaru listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he refused. He told her that bringing back this memory might change the way she saw the world, and he did not want to carry that kind of responsibility. He suggested that she ask other people or slowly figure it out herself during the next 3 years of high school, but Eru shook her head. She said she had already gone to the staff room and spoken to every teacher, yet none of them had worked at the school long enough to know her uncle. She also said that this matter was too personal for her to discuss with just anyone. She trusted Hutaru because of the way he thought. Then she added one last detail. Her uncle had been missing for 7 years, and the family was preparing to hold a funeral soon. Before saying goodbye to him for the last time, she wanted to remember the words he had once said to her. Her voice became softer, and she looked down at the table as she tried to hold back her tears. Hutaru watched her quietly for a moment. Then he said he would help, but he made it clear that he would not take responsibility for whatever effect the truth might have on her. Eru's face brightened right away, and she thanked him. Soon after that, midterm exams arrived, and club activities stopped for a while. Hutaru spent those days studying and going to school, so he barely saw Eru during that period. When the final exam ended, he went home and dropped onto his bed. There, on his desk, he found a letter from his older sister. He opened it and read it. She wrote that she was currently stuck in Istanbul at the Japanese embassy because of a passport problem. In the letter, she asked how the club was doing, whether any new members had joined, and reminded him again about the yearly anthology tradition. Then she mentioned something important. The old anthologies were not in the library or the archives at all. They were stored in a wall safe in the club room. She also added that the safe was unlocked. The next day, the club gathered in their room, and by then, Mayaka had officially become the 4th member. Hutaru shared the contents of the letter with everyone. At first, they felt relieved, but when they looked around the room, they realized there was no safe anywhere. Hutaru told them not to panic. Club rooms changed every year. Since his sister had graduated 2 years earlier, the safe would be in the room the club had used back then. He had already asked around and learned that the biology lab had served as the Classics Club room the year before. The group walked down the hallway toward that lab. On the way, Hutaru noticed 2 small sensor devices attached to the walls on both sides of the corridor, but the girls did not seem to notice them. When they reached the door, they found it locked. They knocked, and after a moment, a long-haired senior stepped out and kept the door mostly shut behind him. A strong smell of cologne came from him. He introduced himself and said that the newspaper club now used the room, although he was the only one there that day. Eru politely explained that the Classics Club was looking for a wall safe that should still be inside. The senior suddenly grew tense and claimed that he had never seen any safe there. Mayaka reminded him that students were allowed to inspect the room if needed. The senior hesitated for a moment, but then he let them inside. Hutaru looked around carefully. Papers were spread over the table, table. A radio sat near the edge. The window was open and a fan pointed straight at it, even though that setup could easily blow the papers away. The group searched the room, but found nothing. Then Hotaru asked the senior if he had moved anything large when the newspaper club moved in. The senior said he had shifted a few cardboard boxes. Hotaru then calmly said that if they could not find the safe themselves, he would ask a staff member to search the room properly. The senior's face changed at once. His breathing became heavier, and he told them to leave. Hotaru walked out with the girls and told the senior that if the anthologies appeared, he could just leave them in the classics club room. Not long after that, the anthologies were sitting in a neat pile on their table. Mayaka asked Hotaru how he had figured it out. He quietly pulled her aside and told her to keep it secret. Then he explained everything. The sensors in the hallway, the fresh cologne, the fan aimed at the open window, and the radio on the desk all pointed to one thing. The senior had been smoking in the room. Since he came from a respected family, getting caught would cause serious problems for him. That meant the safe was most likely where he had hidden his cigarettes and lighter, which was why he refused to reveal it. The moment Hotaru mentioned staff, the senior had no choice but to hand over the anthologies himself. Just then, Satoshi walked into the room dressed in a sunflower costume, and Mayaka showed him the recovered books. At the same time, Eru pulled Hotaru aside. She held up one of the volumes. The title on the cover was Huka. She told him that this was the anthology connected to her uncle. Inside, a text written 1 year after he had left school described him as a hero who sacrificed everything for the greater good. Eru pressed her hand to her forehead and said she felt like the answer was close, yet she still could not reach it. Hotaru turned to the stack and started looking for the first issue, the one from when her uncle had still been a student. Mayaka checked through the pile and then told them the bad news. The first volume was missing. While walking home that evening, Hotaru told Eru that she should also share her uncle's story with Satoshi and Mayaka. Eru hesitated because she did not want too many people involved, but Hotaru pointed out that the two of them alone might not be enough to solve it. Eru stopped walking, thought about it for a moment, and then agreed to tell them the next day. At the club the following afternoon, Eru explained everything. She told Satoshi and Mayaka about her uncle Sakitani Jun, his disappearance, the memory she had blocked, and the funeral that would happen soon. Both of them listened quietly until she finished. After hearing everything, they promised to help. The group then decided that their main goal was to find out what had really happened 45 years ago. They agreed to meet at Eru's home that weekend, and each of them would bring research and their own theory. Saturday came with gray skies overhead. Hotaru stood beside his bicycle and waited until he heard Satoshi calling from down the road. Satoshi came riding toward him at full speed and almost crashed before stopping at the last second. Then the two of them set off together, leaving the city behind and heading toward the countryside. As they rode, the streets grew quieter, and rice fields and low hills stretched along both sides of the road. During the ride, Hotaru asked Satoshi if he enjoyed his high school life. Satoshi slowed down a little and said he had his own problems too, but he preferred to stay cheerful and focus on the good parts. Hotaru gave no reply and kept riding in silence. After a long trip, they arrived at the Chitanda estate. The property was large, and a tall wooden gate stood at the entrance. Behind it was an old, spacious house, built in a traditional style and carefully maintained for generations. Eru welcomed them at the door and led them inside. They passed through several rooms with polished floors and old screens, and the air carried a faint smell of tatami and wood polish. In one of the inner rooms, Mayaka was already waiting at a low table with papers spread out in front of her. Everyone sat down around the table. Eru handed them copies of the preface from the second anthology. It described Sakitani Jun as someone who left the school, not just as a student, but as a hero, and a legend who gave up everything for the greater good. The passage had been written 1 year after he left school. Eru then shared her theory first. She believed that during the school festival 45 years ago, outsiders came in, caused trouble, and harassed students. Her uncle then stood up to them, gathered support, and drove them away. But in that process, he hit one of the intruders in front of a teacher and was expelled because of that violence. The others listened and thought about it. Satoshi then pointed out that the kind of youth gangs Eru described did not really appear until about 5 years after that event. Hotaru added that the school had long banned any festival stalls that involved money, so there would have been nothing there for outsiders to steal. Eru listened to their reasoning, accepted it, and quietly sat back down. After that, Satoshi stretched his legs and asked if they could move somewhere more comfortable. Eru suggested the veranda that looked out over the garden pond, so they carried their papers outside. The pond looked still and dark under the cloudy sky, while frogs croaked somewhere near the reeds. Next, it was Mayaka's turn. She handed out several pages of notes and explained her theory. She believed the whole matter was tied to a political struggle between the government and schools. In her view, the authorities had tried to control the curriculum so they could turn students into obedient supporters. orders. The school resisted that pressure. Teachers and students then joined together, held protests and strikes, and Sakitani Jun led that resistance. Because of that, officials targeted him and used their influence to have him removed. Hotaru and Satoshi both admitted that her theory had a strong structure, but they also saw a clear problem. The protests Mayaka mentioned had taken place in June, while Sakitani left the school in October. The gap between those dates was too large to ignore, so the theory did not fully fit. A little later, Satoshi admitted he was hungry. Eru brought everyone back inside to the kitchen and started making rice balls while the discussion continued. The smell of fresh rice quickly filled the room. Once she finished, she placed the onigiri on a plate in the middle of the table. Then Satoshi spread out old newspaper clippings and school newsletters that he had collected. His theory was somewhat similar to Mayaka's, but he changed the focus. He believed the real conflict was between students and teachers, not between the school and the government. According to him, the school had been trying to reduce the length of the cultural festival, so students would focus more on academics. That led to protests. But the clippings also showed that those protests had stayed mostly peaceful. There was no record of any physical clash with teachers. On top of that, the same time gap remained. The protests had happened months before the expulsion. Now, all three theories had been presented, so everyone looked at Hotaru. He shifted awkwardly because everything in his notes overlapped with what the others had already said. Still, they pushed him to say something. Hotaru stood up and asked where the washroom was. Eru pointed him down the hall. As he walked there, he passed an open door and noticed Eru's room. Her desk and even parts of the floor were covered with handwritten notes. Charts, copied papers, and timelines were spread everywhere. Hotaru stood there for a brief moment, then kept walking to the washroom. Once inside, he shut the door, leaned against the wall, and quietly sorted the facts in his mind. Several minutes later, he came back and told everyone that he had a theory. The room fell silent at once. Hotaru began by listing the facts they already knew. The protests had happened in June, but Sakitani left in October. The conflict clearly involved students and teachers. The newsletter showed that the main issue was the cultural festival. Teachers wanted to shorten it, while students wanted to keep it at 5 days. Sakitani had stood on the student side and led them. In the end, the school gave in and allowed the festival to continue the way the students wanted. But Hotaru believed the school had not forgotten that conflict. Expelling Sakitani right away would have caused even more trouble because students saw him as a hero, so the school waited instead. Time passed, the tension faded, and once things settled down, they quietly expelled him later by using some other reason. That explained why there was a gap between June and October. It also explained why the second anthology, written the following year, praised him as a legend who had sacrificed himself for everyone else. The festival was later reduced to 3 days, but only after he was already gone. No one argued with his explanation. Satoshi and Mayaka both said the theory made sense. Eru gave a faint smile, but then her eyes dropped to the table. She quietly asked one question. If her uncle had left the school as a proud hero, then why had his words made her cry so badly when she was a child? Hotaru had no answer to that. Eru quickly shook her head and thanked everyone. She said the mystery was solved for now. By then, rain had started falling outside. Eru gave Hotaru an umbrella for the ride home, while Satoshi pulled a folded raincoat from his bag. At the gate, they said goodbye and rode off into the wet evening. Satoshi and Hotaru rode their bikes through the evening rain. Water kept dripping from their hoods as they moved down the road. While riding, Satoshi looked at Hotaru and said that for the first time in a long while, he actually seemed interested in something. Hotaru kept looking ahead. Then Satoshi asked if this change was because of Eru. Hotaru shook his head and said that he was simply tired of living without caring about anything. When he looked at Eru, Satoshi, and Mayaka, he felt uneasy in a strange way. The three of them lived with warmth and purpose, and he wanted a little of that for himself. At their usual corner, the two of them split up. Hotaru went home, parked his bike, and entered the quiet house. Then he sat alone in his room and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the first time he saw Eru standing by the clubroom window. He also thought about those afternoons when all of them sat around the low table and talked together. During those moments, the empty and dull feeling that always stayed with him seemed to disappear. Everything felt lighter. As he sat there, he started wondering if Sakitani Jun had once felt the same way at that school, while being surrounded by classmates who all believed in something. Then the phone rang. Hotaru picked it up and heard his sister's cheerful voice from far away. She had already moved on to another country and started talking about her latest trip. After that, she asked what he had been doing lately. Hotaru told her about the anthology and mentioned that he had read Huka. For a brief moment, the line went quiet. Then she said that Huka had always been one of her favorite works. After that, she called it a tragedy. She described Sakitani as a kind person who got caught in a sad story. Hotaru immediately asked her to explain, but she suddenly said she had to go. Then the call ended. After that, Hotaru spread all his notes across the desk and looked at them again. This time, they felt different. His theory had painted Sakitani as a proud hero who left school while being respected by everyone. But his sister had called it a tragedy, and that word did not fit a heroic ending. If it was truly a tragedy, then something must have gone badly wrong. Huta stayed there for a long time, thinking quietly while the rain tapped against the window. The next afternoon, he called the others to the club room. When he arrived, Eru, Satoshi, and Mayaka were already there. Huta told them that his theory was still incomplete. He explained that the word sacrifice in the foreword of the anthology still had not been fully understood. It could describe a noble act done willingly, but it could also mean something painful that was forced on someone. They still needed to know which meaning was true. Satoshi then said that the only way to know for sure was to find the person who had written that foreword. Hutaru replied that he had already checked. The writer was the head librarian, Yauko. Her age matched the timeline, and she had attended the school 45 years earlier as a member of the Classics Club. So the group gathered their things and headed to the library. Inside, tall shelves stood in long rows under bright fluorescent lights. Near the back, Yauko was putting books back in place. She smiled when she saw them and said she still had a few minutes of work left. Mayaka stepped forward and started helping her with the books. Then Haru showed Yauko the foreword from Huka and asked if she had written it. She said yes. After looking at their faces, she asked why students their age were interested in something that had happened so long ago. Eru then told her that Sakitani Jun was her uncle. Yauko asked how he was doing now, and Eru quietly replied that he had disappeared in India 7 years ago and no one had heard from him since. Yauko then took them to her small office behind the front desk. She sat down, carefully read through Hutaru's notes, and told him that his work was impressive for something based only on the anthology. But then she said that one missing part changed the whole story. She began explaining what the school had been like 45 years earlier. Back then, the cultural festival lasted for 5 full days and attracted visitors from all over the city. The excitement during that week was huge, but in the year she entered school, things went too far. During the festival, fights broke out among students. Because of that, the principal announced that the festival will be reduced from 5 days to only 2, and many heavy restrictions would be added. The students reacted strongly. Rallies began, and protest banners covered the hallways. The movement needed a public leader, but anyone who took that role would later face serious punishment, so the true planners stayed hidden. Sakitani, who was actually quiet and did not like conflict, ended up being pushed into that position. He became the face of the protest, even though he had never chosen that role for himself. The protests grew larger and stronger. In the end, the school gave in and allowed the festival to remain 5 days long. That night, the students gathered on campus and burned their protest banners in a bonfire to celebrate. But the flames spread too far, and an old building on campus caught fire and burned down. Firefighters spent the whole night trying to control it. The next morning, the school needed someone to blame. They chose Sakitani. He was expelled, and not one student stepped forward to defend him. Everyone stayed quiet and let him carry all the blame alone. When Yauko finished, the room became completely still. Then Eru stood up and asked one more thing. She wanted to know why her uncle had chosen the name Huka for the anthology. Yauko answered that Sakitani had picked that title himself, but she had never understood the reason. At that moment, Hutaru slowly let out a breath and said he understood it now. The others looked at him. He explained that Yoka was a kind of wordplay. It could sound like the word ice cream, but if it was broken apart, it became ice cream. Sakitani had hidden his true feelings inside that title. He wanted to scream that he was innocent. He wanted to scream that no one stood by him. He wanted to scream because his classmates had watched him get destroyed and stayed silent. As soon as Hutaru said that, tears filled Eru's eyes. She said she finally remembered. Her uncle had once told her that sometimes even the people closest to you would watch you suffer and do nothing. In the end, all you could do was scream. That memory had terrified her when she was little, and it made her cry so hard that she could not stop. Eru wiped her tears away and thanked Hutaru. At last, the mystery was over. The following day, the group met again in the club room. Mayaka placed a rough draft of the anthology on the table. Eru looked through it first, then handed it to Hutaru. When he opened it, he saw that the main article had been assigned to him. Mayaka told him that since he had solved the mystery, he should be the one to write it. Eru offered to write it for him instead, but Mayaka firmly refused. Hutaru did not argue. He accepted it and said he would start working on the outline soon. He planned to write it as a tribute to Sakitani. Later that afternoon, Hutaru and Eru walked home together. On the way, Hutaru asked why she had finally agreed to share her uncle's story with the others after protecting it so carefully. Eru answered that her mother once told her that after a few years, these things would start to feel small and unimportant. That idea scared her. She did not want to forget. After speaking with Hutaru, Satoshi, and Mayaka, she realized that she wanted to keep this memory with her no matter what. She wanted to remember it clearly with all her heart for as long as possible. EPO 6 summer vacation was getting close. close, and for several days, Ero had been asking Hotaru to join the group on a trip to the hot springs. Hotaru kept avoiding the answer, but Ero did not stop. In the end, he finally agreed. A few days before the break, Hotaru sat at his desk in class. Sunlight came through the room and chalk dust drifted near the board while the teacher kept talking in a dull voice. Then, a sharp sound came from the classroom next door. Loud voices followed, and one of them was clearly Eru's. She was arguing with her teacher in a firm and steady tone. Some students in Hotaru's class turned toward the wall to listen. Their own teacher paused for a moment, then continued the lesson. Later that afternoon, the four of them met in the clubroom. The windows were slightly open, and warm air moved the curtains back and forth. Mayaka sat at the table with both fists pressed against the surface. Her face was red with anger, and she was shouting at Satoshi about something. Her voice filled the whole room. Then Eru came in, quietly placed down her bag, walked over to Mayaka, and sat beside her. She gently put a hand on the table near Mayaka's, and tried to calm things down in an even voice. But Mayaka only got louder. Hotaru, who was sitting back with a book resting on his knee, looked at her and simply told her to stop. His voice stayed flat and quiet, but it worked. Mayaka pressed her lips together and dropped back into her seat. After that, the room fell silent. Satoshi then spoke first and brought up the idea of how different people deal with anger. He pointed out that Eru never seemed to lose her calm no matter what happened around her. Mayaka folded her arms and stayed quiet. Then, after a short pause, Hotaru closed the book and asked Eru what had happened earlier with her teacher. The words came out before he could stop himself. Eru straightened at once and her eyes widened slightly. She looked at him with that familiar expression she always had when a new mystery appeared. Hotaru understood immediately that he had made a mistake. He stood up and reached for his bag, but Eru grabbed the strap before he could leave. She told him this one really mattered, so Hotaru sat back down. Eru placed both hands on the table and started explaining. That morning, her math teacher had walked into class and written a problem on the board, but it was not part of the material they were studying. None of the students recognized it. The teacher then called on several students, one after another, but each one either said they did not know or gave the wrong answer. The teacher became more irritated each time, and the way he tapped the chalk against the board grew sharper. At that point, Eru raised her hand and told him that the class had not studied that topic yet. The teacher argued back, but Eru did not back down. The two of them went back and forth for several minutes until the teacher finally checked his notes, stopped, and realized that he had gone ahead of the lesson plan by mistake. Satoshi leaned forward and said that this teacher was known for preparing carefully. His classes always followed a fixed order, so a mistake like that did not match the kind of person he was. Eru agreed and said that was exactly why the whole thing kept bothering her. Then both of them looked toward Hotaru. Hotaru rubbed the back of his neck and suggested that maybe the teacher had simply skipped a day in his schedule. Mayaka clicked her tongue right away and told him that answer was lazy, and everyone there knew it. Hotaru did not argue. He just sat quietly and thought. Then Satoshi casually added something. He said that his own class, which was Section A, had already studied that same math problem. He even said he still did not fully understand it, which was why he recognized it when Eru described it. For a moment, the room became completely still. Hotaru then reached into a snack bag on the table and pulled out a few small crackers shaped like letters. He lined them up in front of him and slowly turned some of them around. Then he pointed at the letters A and D. Both were lowercase, and their shapes looked very similar. One had a tail going one way, and the other had it going the other way. If someone flipped one around, it could easily be mistaken for the other. Then Hotaru explained everything. The teacher probably prepared different lesson notes for each class. Satoshi was in Class A, while Eru was in Class D. If the class labels on the folders or papers were written in lowercase, then A and D could look almost the same. So the teacher must have picked up the wrong notes that morning and accidentally taught Class D, using the material prepared for Class A. That was why the problem seemed unfamiliar to Eru's class, but had already been covered in Satoshi's. As soon as Hotaru finished, Eru leaned toward him across the table. Her face came close, and she thanked him with a bright and open smile. Satoshi grinned from the other side of the room, while Mayaka turned her face slightly toward the wall and said nothing against the answer. By then, the afternoon light had changed. Long golden lines stretched across the floor and climbed up the far wall of the clubroom. The clock above the door showed that it was already past 4. Hotaru packed his bag. Satoshi threw his bag over one shoulder. Mayaka picked up the small stack of manga she had left near the window. Eru placed her notebook inside her bag and closed it. Then the four of them left the school building together. The bus moved along a narrow road that curved through green hills. Rice fields stretched out on both sides, and the engine kept humming as the trees grew thicker the farther they got from the city. Hotaru sat by the window with his forehead against the cool glass. His face looked pale, and his stomach had been upset since the first sharp turn. By the time the bus stopped in the countryside, he could barely stand properly. Mayaka told everyone to wait because her cousins ran a nearby inn. The place was closed for maintenance and was not accepting normal guests, but her family had agreed to let them stay. After a short time, a van came to pick them up. They got in, and the road became even rougher. Dust rose behind the tires as they kept going. When the van finally stopped in front of a large wooden building, surrounded by trees, Hutaru stepped out with shaky legs. Two girls were waiting at the entrance. Mayaka introduced them as her younger cousins, Rie and Kaio. The girls bowed and guided the group inside. The hallway smelled like old wood and fresh tatami. Hutaru and Satoshi were taken to a room on the second floor. Satoshi opened the window and leaned out. Behind the line of dark cedar trees, mountains rose in the distance, and a stream shined far below. Even Hutaru admitted the view was beautiful. Later, Mayaka called them downstairs for dinner. They sat around a low table filled with rice, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, and miso soup. Steam rose from every dish. After eating, Hutaru returned to his room and saw that Satoshi was already gone. He guessed Satoshi had gone to the hot springs. Hutaru lay on the floor for a while and watched television, but it quickly bored him. So he picked up a towel and stepped into the hallway. There, he found Eru standing near the stairs with a towel and a small cloth bag in her hands. He asked where she was going, and she said she was heading to the hot springs. The two of them walked together down a stone path lit by small lanterns. On the way, Eru mentioned that Mayaka had gone to spend time with her cousins, so she was going to the bath alone. Hutaru simply nodded. At the entrance, they separated and went to their own bathing areas. Hutaru slowly lowered himself into the warm water. Rocks lined the bath, and steam rose into the night air. Satoshi was already there, soaking nearby. The two of them talked casually for a while, but then Hutaru's vision started to blur. The heat pressed hard against his body, and his arms felt heavy. Satoshi noticed right away and quickly pulled him out. Then he half carried him back to the room, where Mayaka helped lay out a mattress and covered him with a blanket. Sometime later, Eru opened the sliding door and knelt beside him. She asked if he felt better, and Hutaru said he was fine as he turned to face her. Eru then told him that the others were in the next room, sharing ghost stories, and said he could join if he wanted. After that, she went back and left the door slightly open. Hutaru stayed where he was and listened to the voices from the next room. Then he heard Ria begin telling a story about the inn. Long ago, a man had checked into room 7 in the old building across from the main house. He paid in advance and told the staff not to disturb him. He refused every meal. Then one night, a scream echoed through the inn. A woman found him hanging from a rope inside the room. He had taken money from a company, lost it all in a failed business, and ended his life. After that, guests who stayed there said they saw a dark figure hanging from the ceiling. One man even became sick and died in that room. In the end, the family brought in someone to cleanse the place. A new building was later built in front of the old one, and room 7 was sealed. No one went near it after that. After hearing the story, Hutaru got up and walked to the window. Across the courtyard, the old building stood dark and silent. A cold feeling ran through his arms. He reached out to close the window, but just before it shut, he saw a small figure run across the ground below and disappear behind the corner of the building. He watched for a moment, then closed the curtain and went to sleep. The next morning, Hutaru came downstairs and found Mayaka sitting very close to Eru at the breakfast table. Her face had gone pale. She said that during the night, she woke up because of a gust of wind. When she turned to close the window, she saw a dark shape hanging inside room 7. Rie laughed and said Mayaka had probably imagined it because of the ghost stories. But Kaio quietly said that their father had told Rie not to tell that story to guests. Then Eru leaned closer to Hutaru and quietly told him that Mayaka had woken her during the night. When Eru looked toward room 7, she had seen the same shape. Hutaru said both of them had probably mistaken something normal for a ghost. Mayaka immediately demanded that he explain what else it could have been. Eru's eyes sharpened with curiosity, and she asked Hutaru to investigate. The group went to Hutaru's room and started discussing what Eru remembered. They also tried to go and inspect room 7, and they asked Kaio to take them there, but she refused and rushed away. Outside, Hutaru noticed that the ground was wet. It had rained during the night. Before they could continue, Kaio came back and announced that lunch was ready. During lunch, Rie entered wearing a colorful kimono, and everyone complimented her. Afterward, Satoshi quietly pulled Hutaru aside and mentioned that Kaio had wanted to wear the kimono too, but Rai had refused to let her. Hutaru also noticed something else. Rai had written her name on both her teacup and her exercise ball. He noticed it and kept the thought to himself. Later that day, Hutaru went to the hot springs again. Satoshi was already there in the water. While they talked, Satoshi mentioned that late the previous night, drums had been sounding from a nearby local summer festival. He seemed surprised that Hutaru had slept through it. Hutaru then asked if the festival had happened that same evening, and Satoshi said yes. Hutaru immediately got out of the bath. Outside, he found Eru waiting for him, and the two of them walked back together along the stone path. On the way, Hutaru told her that the hanging shape was not a ghost at all. It was a kimono left hanging to dry. Kayo had secretly taken Ri's kimono and worn it to the festival without permission. The small figure Hotaru saw running outside that night had been Kayo sneaking out. Then rain started to fall, and she returned with the kimono completely wet. She had to dry it before Rie noticed, and the only place no one would check was room 7. So she opened the window, hung the kimono from the ceiling, and left it there overnight. The dark shape that Mayaka and Eru saw in the window had been that soaked kimono swaying in the dark. Aru became quiet after hearing the truth. She said it felt sad that Kayo had to go through all that trouble just to wear a kimono. Then she looked across the yard. In the distance, Rie was walking slowly along the path with Kayo riding on her back. Their laughter carried through the evening air. Eru smiled and ran toward them. Hotaru stayed where he was and quietly watched the 4 figures grow smaller under the orange sky. A few days later, Hotaru and Satoshi dragged themselves to school and found students already busy with festival preparations. Everyone was running around, carrying boxes and shouting instructions, and the whole place felt noisy and chaotic. Seeing all that activity made them think about how much had changed since the day Hotaru first got pulled into the Classics Club by Eru. Satoshi started feeling strangely nostalgic, but then he remembered they had a meeting with the girls. The two of them quickly headed there, only to find that Mayaka had already arrived and was angrily waving her arms around while complaining about something. Hotaru barely paid attention until Eru finally showed up and changed the mood. She explained that a friend of hers had worked on a movie with her class and wanted the club to come watch it before the festival. The group then went to the classroom where Fuyumi was waiting for them. As soon as they arrived, Satoshi tried to act familiar and said they had met before, but Fuyumi showed no reaction and ignored that completely so she could explain the real reason she called them. Hotaru, meanwhile, did not even want to be there and wondered why he had to spend time watching a student film at all. But since no one cared what he thought, he sat down and waited for the screening to begin. The movie started with a group of students going on a trip. Instead of simply enjoying it, they found an abandoned building and decided to stay there for the night. At one point, 2 of them went off on their own, found some ordinary keys, and left the master key behind. After that, everyone split up to look for rooms. But when they later came back together, they realized that one classmate was missing. They searched through the creepy building until they found a locked door. Using the master key from earlier, they opened it and found their missing friend dead inside, lying in a pool of blood and organs. Near the door was an arm holding a key. One of the students then looked out the window for clues, noticed something strange outside in the corner, and just like that, the movie suddenly ended. After the screening, Fuyumi turned to them and asked if they could solve the murder mystery. Hotaru was already irritated and could not understand why she was asking other people to do this instead of solving it herself. He also wondered why it had to be their club. Fuyumi then explained that she had heard about the Classics Club solving the anthology case, so she believed they were capable of handling this too. She also admitted that the movie was not even finished because the scriptwriter had fallen sick right after writing that last scene. Since the ending had never been completed, she wanted their help figuring it out. The rest of the group immediately turned toward Hotaru and looked at him like he was the only one who could solve it. They all tried to persuade him, but Hotaru attempted to avoid the responsibility by saying this was too much for one club to take on. Fuyumi then added that some of her classmates had already come up with their own theories and asked if the club could at least listen to them. That made Hotaru's attempt to escape fall apart almost immediately. Then Eru leaned in with her usual gentle pressure, and in the end, Hotaru gave in again. The next day, the summer heat became so strong that Hotaru seriously thought about skipping school. But Eru was not going to let that happen. She showed up and practically dragged him out so he would not stay at home. The two of them reached the club room just in time for their so-called investigation. Not long after that, a shy boy named Kuriko arrived to guide them to another classroom, where the other students were already waiting to present their own theories. So they could begin with Junya, the assistant director. Before anyone could question him, Eru brought out a box of whiskey-flavored chocolates from her family. She offered them to everyone. The others quickly spat them out because of the strong taste, but Eru surprisingly liked them and kept eating more. Soon after, Junya started talking at length about how difficult his job as assistant director had been. He went on for a while until the others finally asked him to give his theory. Junya said the killer entered through the window, committed the murder, and escaped the same way. He believed that because the floor plan showed the doors and blocked passages were not possible routes. But Mayaka quickly pointed out a flaw. If someone had climbed in through the window, there should have been footprints on the grass outside. Junya refused to accept that problem and left anyway, still looking confident in his own answer. After Junya was gone, Hotaru called his theory useless and added another problem. Anyone entering through the window would have been seen by the students upstairs. Then Hotaru asked Kuriko to bring him the script. Not long after that, Tomohiro arrived and confidently began presenting his his own theory. He spread out the floor plans and explained that the victim could not have been killed by one of his classmates using the master key, because anyone crossing a lobby would have been seen. Then he revealed the main point of his theory. He brought out a rope and said the scriptwriter had specifically asked for it, so he believed the culprit came in from above. Hotaru then asked whether the writer had made any other requests. Tomohiro proudly showed 2 bottles of fake blood and explained that the writer had asked for the small one, but they had used the large one instead. After giving that explanation, he left as if his theory had solved everything. But Hotaru quickly pointed out that the idea still did not work. The old window made that route impossible because the culprit would have been seen before even starting to climb in. A little later, Kurako came back with the script. This time, Misaki arrived and presented her own theory. Unlike the others, she believed none of the victim's friends could have committed the crime, so she created a story about a hidden character who slowly killed them one by one until only 2 people remained, fell in love, and escaped together. But when Hotaru asked what evidence supported that idea, it became clear that her theory had no real basis. After Misaki left, Eru tried to make a point of her own, but by then, the whiskey chocolates she had kept eating finally caught up with her, and she suddenly lost her train of thought in the middle of speaking. After that, the remaining group sat down and compared all the theories with the actual script. In the end, they told Kurako that none of the theories were convincing. Soon after, Mayaka took Eru home. Later, Hotaru and Satoshi had their usual casual talk for a while, and then the 2 of them started heading home as well. But on the way back, Hotaru ran into Fuyumi, who was already waiting for him. A little later, Hotaru ended up at a cafe with Fuyumi. As he sat there, he quietly worried about not having enough money to even order tea. Fuyumi noticed and told him not to worry about it. Then she finally explained why she had asked the Classics Club for help in the first place. She said she had heard about his skill in solving difficult mysteries and believed he was the right person to figure out what the scriptwriter was trying to do. Hearing that shook Hotaru more than he expected, but he still tried to stay calm and not show it. Fuyumi then kept talking and carefully guided the conversation in a way that made it even harder for Hotaru to ignore her request. By the end of it, he was already pulled in deeper than before. The next day, Hotaru unexpectedly called Satoshi to the club room for a meeting, even though summer vacation had already started. Satoshi immediately understood that it had to be something serious if Hotaru was willing to call him in during the break. When they arrived, even Mayaka could tell something was different about him, and she quickly guessed that Fuyumi had influenced him somehow. Before long, they mentioned that Eru was probably still exhausted after eating too much chocolate. Then the group rewatched the movie, hoping to find new clues. But instead of progress, they mostly got frustrated because the film itself was so poorly made. In the middle of that, one of Satoshi's friends showed up to remind him about a makeup test he had to take. Satoshi did not argue and simply handed his notes on the case to Mayaka before leaving with him. After Satoshi left, Mayaka said she had no interest in sitting around with Hotaru while he stayed in such a gloomy mood. Then she also left, handing the notes over and leaving Hotaru alone. Now that he was finally by himself, Hotaru started thinking more clearly. He focused on the movie, went through the details carefully, and at last found the answers they had all been chasing. After that, he called Fuyumi and explained his reasoning. He told her that none of the theories from the other students worked. Sneaking in through the old window was too difficult, and using the master key through the lobby was also impossible because the area was too exposed. Then he said Misaki had been partly right about one thing. There really was an extra person involved, but it was not some hidden killer. It was the cameraman. That explained why the film looked the way it did. The cameraman was treated like background staff by the group. So in Hotaru's theory, he took the master key after everyone entered the building and then killed the victim before anyone noticed. Fuyumi praised him for figuring it out and added that the answer made sense, especially since the cameraman was the only one left in the lobby. But Hotaru said the scriptwriter probably only wanted to create a small mystery and did not care that much about making the ending perfect. Fuyumi thanked him for helping. A few days later, everyone gathered in her classroom and watched the finished version of the movie play out. When it ended, Satoshi and the girls praised Hotaru for solving another case. But after Eru and Satoshi left, Mayaka quietly pulled him aside and asked about the rope that Tomohiro said the scriptwriter had requested. The moment she brought it up, Hotaru realized that something still did not fit. When Mayaka noticed how badly Hotaru reacted to being wrong, she quickly changed the subject and said she actually liked the ending of the movie before leaving. A little later, while Hotaru was heading to the locker room, Satoshi stopped him and said almost the same thing. This time, Hotaru tried hard to insist that his theory was still the real ending, but Satoshi told him to accept that he had been wrong, then walked away. After that, Hotaru reached the locker room, where Eru appeared. He immediately understood what she wanted to discuss, so the two of them went for a walk. Eru could already tell that Hotaru was blaming himself, so she took him to the river to calm him down. There, she gently explained that his theory had missed the point. She believed the scriptwriter had been aiming for a very different type of ending. From Fuyumi's description, the writer seemed like a shy girl who disliked violence and was not even very interested in mystery films to begin with. Eru then told Hotaru to think about one important thing. The writer had probably already known the ending she wanted from the beginning, and that explained a lot. Hotaru argued that this did not fit because the writer got sick and could not finish the script. But Eru reminded him that the writer was far too shy to leave everyone hanging without reason. She pointed out that the fact Fuyumi had gathered everyone together to discuss the ending showed that the sickness was probably not even that serious. At the same time, Eru admitted that she was not focused on whether Hotaru's ending was bad, because she actually thought his version sounded very good. What really mattered to her was understanding why the writer could not use the ending she originally wanted. After hearing that, Hotaru took a moment to think. Then he realized W's first mistake had been treating the film like just another mystery case instead of paying attention to the feelings behind the story. A few hours later, back at home, Hotaru kept thinking about what the real ending could be. He nearly gave up, but then he noticed an old book and started flipping through it for ideas. After reading for several minutes and thinking it over, he finally connected everything. At that moment, he realized that he had been used by someone else from the start. The next day, Hotaru waited for Fuyumi along her usual route and asked her to sit down with him for tea. This time, he had actually saved enough money to pay for it himself. Then, he directly asked why she had lied about him being some great detective, when what she really wanted was someone to write the ending of her script. By then, he had already figured out that the original story must have been weak, especially after Tomohiro mentioned how much blood the script called for. Hotaru then explained his full conclusion. Fuyumi had made the scriptwriter pretend to be sick so she could gather the whole class and even pull Hotaru into a fake mystery contest. It had never really been about solving the case. It was simply her way of collecting everyone's ideas so she could choose the best one and use it for the movie. After laying all of that out, Hotaru asked her why she had tricked him into believing he had talent just so she could use him. But Fuyumi calmly turned it back on him and said it was his own fault for being too clueless and too naive to notice that she had been playing him the whole time.